Hello and welcome again to another exciting edition of the Pittsburgh Steelers Show on your SteelerFury.com podcast. I'm your host, Bradshaw Ben, a.k.a. Accidental Zen on Twitter. And also, if you come to SteelerFury.com, you would know me as Bradshaw Ben. I'm just the same guy. In addition to that resume of names, I got a couple of great names with me. The two best cohorts money still can't buy who's joining us from the greater Indianapolis area, and I'm not really sure what's greater about it. His name is Jeremy Coleman, also known as Smith & Smoke, and he's with us. How are you, sir?
Doing great.
And also joining us from the greater North Augusta Chamber of Commerce, his name is Dom, also known as FC. He's with us. How are you, sir?
I am absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, you are. Well, and Augusta, the Masters is coming up too. You've started the countdown clock.
Oh, I just can't wait.
Now, do you?
No fans. No fans, and people are so pissed off.
But do you have is there some house that's nearby next to the course that you know somebody?
Oh, I know tons of people. I know tons of people with tickets. Like I said, it's beautiful to go to once. It's great to see. Generally, whenever you're holding the Masters, it's in April here, and you either have 94 degrees and 100% humidity, or it rains non-fucking stop. So you go watch, it's great, and then, hopefully you can rent out your house and leave. That's what the locals around here do.
Sure. Yeah, well, still exciting enough. How's your golf game this year?
It's absolutely horrendous. Horrible. Oh, it's worse than ever.
I played. I'm barely playing these days. I played once. This just it was like when they first opened the golf courses back up after the pandemic. I played and actually I had a run, not the entire round, but I had like a 5 or 6 hole stretch that was as good as I played golf in 30 years or something like that. So I was like, I kind of like this pandemic golf thing. It's good. Anyway, I think it's all that time practicing on the Wii, the Wii golf. Anyway, enough about all of that. We got a Steelers game to talk about. This team, I'm trying to remember what their record is. The Steelers, I think they are 7-0, maybe. So with 7-0 in mind, Dom, I'll throw it to you first. You didn't have a heart attack apparently during the Ravens game. What was your take on that sort of? First of all, how are you feeling at the end of the first half? Let's start with that question.
I was actually very, very disgusted. Probably like 99.6% of Steeler Nation. But out of every bad, I said to the few people I watched the game with that I just hope they let Ben come out, no huddle, we get the kick, and let him, make plays, and then another rookie from this draft class has to go out there and make a play that changed the entire game. So I had some questions of the coordinating in the first half, and as bad as they were in the first half, I was ready to crown their ass as fantastic for the adjustments they made in the second half.
Yeah, and Jeremy, even if the adjustment is letting Ben run the show on offense, I said much the same thing as FC. In my post-game write-up that it was not the best day for the coordinators, but it seemed like the coaching staff in general picked up the team a little bit at halftime. And it's hard. You work with a guy like Isaiah Buggs, first time really getting extended playing time. He looked a lot better in the fourth quarter than he did in the second quarter. I got to believe that coaching helped him out with that. What was your take on this game, both at halftime and then as the game went on from there?
Well, the game started off with a pick six from Robert Spillane, so I was thinking, oh boy, it's going to be a great game overall for the Steelers. And then, that was really kind of the only highlight Pittsburgh had in the first half. So kind of like FC says, I was a little dejected going into halftime, especially since the Ravens were able to drive down and tack on that field goal to make it a 10-point game at half. I was thinking, oh boy, it's going to be a lot harder than I thought because the offense has got to find a way to get going. And sure enough, they did, through coaching. And then kind of like you said, the coordinators had a tough day scheming things open. Even Big Ben said, they kind of went back to playing backyard football in the second half, just lining up different formations, running different route combinations to get people open. So once the second half got started and I saw we finally started to move the ball through the air, I said, okay, we have a shot, because I knew the defense was going to keep us close. They had already done that, ended up forcing 4 turnovers from Lamar Jackson on the day, which couldn't have been more happier to tell my buddy at work that the next day. He's a big Ravens fan. So I threw that right in his face.
Success.
Yeah, so I threw that right in his face. But in general, talk about the grit to come back from a bad first half, ended up winning the game by 4. So
it's funny. I mean, I may be the only one in this case, not just on the show, but like in general in Steelers land. I never reached to the point where I was like, damn, they're going to lose this game. I actually, even when things were bad there at the half, I kind of just thought they need to change up the mojo. I need to change up the mojo, so I feel like I did something different. But mainly they just needed, not to flip on the switch, just to change their, what was in their mind. So clear your head, come out, let's try something different. And I just felt like the score was only 10 points. It was only 10 points different. And the way that they've had made adjustments at the half in virtually all of their games this year, it just seemed likely that they would at least change some things up and play a little better in the second half. And I think, maybe the lowest I was when the offense didn't convert that first drive. But, the first drive of the second half, they didn't convert mainly because, guy dropped the ball, like they kind of ran in the wrong hole, guy dropped the ball. And it's like, before you know it, you're 3 and out. And the interception really did turn things around. FC, I'm famous for saying that I really loved, Highsmith as a sophomore in college. And by the time he got to his testing and everything, I was like, the bloom was off the rose a little bit for him being like a super high peak guy. But I felt all along that he'd be as someone who could contribute early, like a high floor player who was really polished and ready to play. And man, it wasn't just that he made the interception. They used him a lot as the extra linebacker. Now that they didn't have Ulysses Gilbert, he basically took Gilbert's snaps from the previous week. What do you think of him playing this off linebacker situation as a rookie cold? I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Here's the thing is the Steelers basically, if you want to consider in some formations the pre and Watt defensive ends, the Steelers basically played a ton of 4-4 in a way. Different people have different, they want to call big nickel. If I still have 2 300-pounders on the field and I have Bud Dupree and TJ Watt as my ends, I consider that a 4. And, you had Vince Williams, and you had Spillane, and you had, as you said, Highsmith, that's a 3. Excuse me. We play a lot of 4-3 type. What I was very impressed with, especially from Highsmith, was I'm not the biggest Orlando Brown fan, but he's very large, and he can wall people off. Highsmith was able to keep his shoulder free. They attempted a block with Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle, and that wasn't happening. He attacked a tight end away, an outside linebacker, a big 3-4 outside linebacker should attack a tight end in the run game. So, I like to hammer Colbert, but I'm not certain of this. I don't think the Steelers have ever had a coach of the year. Not Bill Cowher, not Chuck Noll, not Mike Tomlin. But I also don't believe they've ever had an executive of the year. Not Dan Rooney, not Art Rooney II, not to be mixed up with the owner.
Junior. Art Rooney Jr. Just to be...
Not Bill Nunn, even though he's in the Hall of Fame. I definitely think Tomlin right now is your coach of the year. And I definitely would have no problem if Kevin Colbert got named your executive of the year whenever you look at what he did in this year's draft and the additions that he made in free agency. You know, he had Spillane, drafted Highsmith. You know, it's a small little things. Mike Hilton, he's been here for a little while, but it's an undrafted free agent. I believe our left tackle, undrafted free agent.
Yep.
Yeah, Kevin Dotson.
Our left guard, undrafted free agent.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
our right tackle is like a fifth round pick. I forgot. Shoot.
Right. And real quick, I think that the biggest momentum changer in this game, and I want to make sure it doesn't get overlooked. I think it's one of the worst calls I've seen in 20 years of football at any level was the call they made on Hayward on the second drive of the game for the Ravens, where the out-of-bounds hit, where was out of bounds.
Yeah,
that's where I think.
Yeah, that gave them a lot of momentum. I think you're right.
Give them all the momentum in the world. I believe that they should have a special flag, an orange flag, that you can use what story in the game, regardless. It's not going to cause where you can challenge a pass interference. You can challenge a penalty on the field, and that is a perfect example of the orange flag. I don't care if it costs you all 3 timeouts if you're wrong. You lose all 3 timeouts. Because at that point, if I'm Mike Tomlin, I would throw that orange flag. I'd risk all 3 of my timeouts.
Sure. Well, they would have started the game with a pick 6 and a miserable 3 and out. And right. You're right. Go back to the sideline and ask.
And you're forcing a punt. And if Baltimore gets down by 14 points, I don't think you have a football game.
Yeah, that is football. And the bad calls are, especially in the NFL, are part and parcel, unfortunately. So, but you're right. That was a big momentum shift. So Jeremy, the thing that people want to point to with this game, and partially it's because I noticed that people in the fan base, like on the boards, talking about it, and also people who are quote unquote, more national voices on, say, Twitter or ESPN or NFL Network, they tend to, if the analyst in the game hits a certain point over and over again, these pundits tend to take that and run with it as if it's like gospel. And obviously in this game, Tony Romo hit over and over again how the Ravens were missing their offensive line. They got offensive linemen knocked out of the game, but yet we're running the ball down the Steelers' throats. They never mentioned Tyson Alualu in this equation. I mean, are you more alarmed at the rushing yards given up, or the thought of playing without Alualu? Like, how did you assess the situation in terms of the Steelers kind of getting gashed with the run against the Ravens?
Well, I mean, I definitely will say it was surprising at times at how they got gashed, because I think it was 2 runs in the fourth quarter. They were like back to back. The Ravens went to this, veer option style, massive sweep options out, and it just gashed them like 3 or 4 times. And I was just like, guys, we've seen this play. It's not like it's, severe X's and O's here. It's more just getting guys and putting guys on hats. And it's like the Ravens executed it every time, and it was, big 14, 20-yard gains. And I was like, oh, my God, what is going on here? That
Johnny Majors is a little before your time, but Johnny Majors would be proud, right, FC?
Oh, yeah, he would. On the head real quick there, Smith. With the Steelers' defensive count was wrong. They were off, where you had 4 blockers on 3 defenders. But that's spot on,
Yeah, so that just surprised me in general, just kind of how it happened, just like back in a row. And I was just like, man, this does not look good at all right now for supposedly, best defense in the league, how they're just been able to gash us left and right and all that. And I was shocked, that we had given up, the amount of rushing yards we did for that game. And we gave up over 200 rushing yards in that game. I understand a lot of that is how special Lamar Jackson is, when he can get out of the pocket and create something, which is why I was so thrilled when he went to scramble again for that 4th down conversion, to basically end the Ravens' chances there. Because I was even telling the guy that I was watching with the B-Dubs, if this isn't the quarterback draw, I'll buy your meal. It's like, I know we all know what's coming here. Can we stop it? And then sure enough, Fitzpatrick got to him, and I couldn't believe he fumbled the ball. I just thought he was short. And then I saw Spillane pick it up. I was like, man, what a wild end to this game. Yeah,
that's true. I mean, Isaiah Buggs apparently called it out in the huddle. He said they're going to –
He beat a double team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean –
Welcome to Pittsburgh. Welcome to Pittsburgh.
I know, exactly, right? I mean, here into stripes there for sure. I mean, FC, I just feel like you're going to, you lose a guy like Tyson Alualu, it really changes everything in terms of what they're doing. And they took a little bit of a risk. They have, they're more worried about having backups who have some pass rush ability. Those are the guys they have, running backup defensive line right now and, or playing special teams or whatever. But, I mean, I kind of had the thought that Carlos Davis, this is before anything happened with Isaiah Buggs in practice this week, I kind of had the idea that Carlos Davis might be their guy that they plug in there, to stop the run game against Ezekiel Elliott this week. But now that looks like even more of a possibility because Buggs apparently hurt his ankle and didn't practice today. What's your take on that situation?
I hope Bud plays, but we were talking about athletic freaks a little before the podcast got started. Carlos Davis, there you have yourself an athletic freak.
Yeah.
I believe to put it in perspective for people, he had an early pro day at the combine. He ran a 4.78 at 320 pounds. You can check that. That's what he was electronically timed at. And then at his pro day, he early pro day, supposedly ran a 4.66 at 316 pounds. So I don't know what you can do with that. My understanding is technique-wise, he was pretty raw, and sophomore, he needed a ton of work with hand placement. And I basically, I think I could find a way to use that type of athlete. I think this week against Dallas would be a good introduction for him to the NFL. And I heard about Bud Dupree. I don't know how serious it is. My understanding is it's not that serious because they weren't really practicing. Tom was basically giving them walkthroughs just because, the pantheon of games they just went through.
Well, and they're also practicing under COVID restrictions, so they have to wear masks. There's a lot of issues about how they can practice and meet this week.
Right. So, the only thing is I heard that Bud Dupree got nicked at practice. I don't know the extent of it. I don't think that really anybody does because that's the Steelers' way, which is good. It's not too many people in business. We'll find out on Sunday.
Yeah, okay, but we don't at this point we don't need any more injury updates.
I agree.
I think we reached the saturation point already. But at least we're not San Francisco. By the way, you saw a stat earlier when I was watching the game. All of the San Francisco players who touched the ball, skilled players who touched the ball in the Super Bowl, were out of tonight's game. Or Breida's gone. He got, he left to another team. But basically, all the other players, it was like 9 guys, including the quarterback, all out tonight. So that right there is, we don't have that kind of problem, thank God. But I guess, more than anything, just happy. As I said last week, if they beat the Ravens by a point, I was going to be happy. The rest of the stuff doesn't really matter. But, Jeremy, I love this idea that the Steelers, you look back at the 7 games, it'd be hard to say they played a really complete game. I mean, the Browns game, more or less, but it doesn't, it kind of feels like there's still so much upside for this team in terms of what they're capable of doing, especially on offense where they have been unstoppable at times and they have been just absolutely terrible for long stretches. Which should you be more concerned about the fact that they have had problems in stretches or more optimistic about the fact that they've been good in stretches? Were you glass half full, glass half empty?
I mean, I'd be more optimistic. I just think there's room for this team to iron out, their inefficiencies at times rather than saying, oh, they've played some truly bad halves of football. I'm more of a guy that looks at that and says, there's plenty of opportunity to turn this around if we don't drop a ball here. We've had a few of those types of just halves and drives, like in the Titans game, we played a complete first half of football, but then the second half was a completely different story. So I would say I still think the best is yet to come. We've gotten guys to step up and really earn their stripes. Robert Spillane looks like a great find here, and then just in general, Isaiah Buggs, like FC mentioned, him calling out, the play for, against, the Ravens this past week, he called it out. He's played some really nice football. I just think the Steelers have guys that have really stepped up in key spots where in previous years we'd be worried about how they're going to do out there. And generally, I think this year it's more of just like the expert, I think that what is it Mike Tomlin says, the standard is the standard.
Yeah, next man up.
Like they've really kind of picked up that bar. They've set a level, and everyone's played up to it for the most part. I mean, even Harry Mondell has come in and looked good in spots. Biggest fullback, one of the bigger fullbacks you've seen in a while, especially with that hair.
Yeah,
that's fun. But they've stepped up and they've played well. With backups, either starting or getting their spot minutes.
Sure.
Just look like the complete team that we've all been wanting for years. They've done it through unconventional means. We were just talking. There's quite a few undrafted free agents. that have really made their mark in the NFL. Alejandro Villanueva, Matt Filer, Mike Hilton, and then takes Tyson Alualu, 8 years after being a first-round pick to come to Pittsburgh. I was reading an article where he was saying he could not have been more thankful that his agent said, you have to at least visit Pittsburgh. You'll understand why we should entertain their offer, and that's exactly the way he did. He said he couldn't be happier to be where he is than where he is right now. So just the team has come together in just a multitude of ways, but they're 7-0. They're playing they have not put together a full complete game yet. I think that's just scary.
I mean, they have over the course of the season either these are starters or key contributors that have either missed games or missed large stretches of games that got injured early in the game. Right tackle, running back, right guard, the nose tackle, slot corner, right, wide receiver. What's that, FC?
Devin Bush, the fuck inside linebacker.
Yeah, and the inside linebacker. I'm saying it is absolutely unbelievable. They're 7-0 when you think about it. It's like that's a lot of guys to cover for. That's a lot of depth. But I think I might have said first couple of weeks of the season that when your depth is good, you have to figure out how to get guys involved. Well, they've certainly figured out how to get guys involved. FC, I was going to ask you a little bit about the Avery Williamson. We talked about Robert Spillane and what a great find he's been. Avery Williamson coming in, there were people talking about that he was going to come in and be the starter. Would you be shocked about that? I kind of would.
I don't think he's going to come in and immediately start. So I think he'll eventually win the job. See how he plays. See how Spillane continues to play. Mike Tomlin said he got brought in for depth, and the job Spillane's until, he can come out and say it's Spillane's. But I'll put it this way. We could have done a lot worse. Very solid addition. I think he has the perfect number to play in Pittsburgh because it's the player that he reminds me of the most. I think he's very James Farrier, where he's good in the run game, he's good in pass coverage, maybe not as good of a blitzer, super high football IQ, super high character off the field, great locker room guy, will be willing to play special teams, will do whatever the coaching staff wants. He's just typical Steeler pickup. He fits in the locker room.
Yeah, and I guess, Jeremy, they were talking about, I heard a little bit this week, last couple of days, that Tomlin had talked, they knew they were interested in Bud Dupree, and they somehow had a conversation with Avery Williamson, and they got Tomlin, the two of them learned that they were both kind of football junkies, and they continued to have football conversations for years later after that. So that was one of the reasons he was handy. Plus, he played for Dick LeBeau, and he played with a bunch of other Steeler coaches and whatever. So there was this connection where he's already sort of familiar with the terminology. I mean, in retrospect, I was a little bit worried about the salary cap money because any kind of extra expenditure I wasn't really into. But when you hear like the whole complete story about that sure sounds pretty convincing.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. What I did not realize that Avery Williamson and Bud Dupree were actually teammates at Kentucky at one point. I did not realize that they were that close in years. I thought Avery Williamson was honestly a little more up in years. I didn't realize he's still only, he's still on the right side of 30. I thought he was at least 32 or something. So, I mean, he's a lot younger than I thought he was. Mm-hmm. But was probably confusing him with another Kentucky linebacker, Wesley Woodyard, who was also on the Titans there for a little bit. But I like the pickup. Well, like you said, he's a smart guy. In a year of COVID, you never know who you might not have week in and week out. He's a fantastic depth piece who could end up starting at some point. I'd like to see him coming off the bench because Spillane has really played so well. He's been in this defense for 2 years now. Obviously he's gotten most of his playing experience this year with the first-team defense. But just in general, his play has been through the roof. I liked Avery Williamson for a long time. I thought he could be a guy the Steelers could go after just to improve depth initially. It works out great that we're getting him for basically pennies on the dollar.
Yep.
His signing bonus is all accounted for already for the Jets. That'll be their dead cap next year. We're only paying him half of his $2.75 million base salary. I mean, that's a great – we're only paying him 1 point something to back up 8 regular season games. I expect we're going to go deep in the playoffs. I think we have a great team this year. I thought it was a great addition. I will say the one other position I would have liked to have shorn up, and those dang Tampa Bay Buccaneers beat it to me, is I would have loved to have traded a 6th or 7th round pick to go get Steve McClendon. I thought all offseason, honestly, I would love to pry away Steve McClendon to really shore up the depth at nose tackle. Obviously, he's was with New York. Now he's with Tampa Bay because Vita Vea went down for Tampa Bay. So he's shoring up their depth there. But I thought that would have been a really just another great move because he's a former Steeler. He understands what we do on defense. And, that would have been another great story because he was another one of Pittsburgh's undrafted free agents who ended up going off to cash that big contract with another team. I thought that would have been really cool to kind of have a homecoming even with Steve McClendon. But in general, I thought the Williamson trade was great. We're flipping a 5th round pick for a 7th round pick in the 2022 draft.
Yeah, and if you let him go after this season, you get a comp pick is probably a 6th rounder worse.
Right.
So, yeah, so it's a pretty good deal especially if you're not keeping him, right? But there's this next off season. I'm tired of talking about it. I don't even want to think about it because it just feels like nearly impossible for them to keep not just the core of their team, but the guys that you feel like are important. It's like, well, okay, there's always going to be some guys that you lose when everybody needs to get paid, but to lose guys that are sort of integral, that's rough. FC, I'll give you the last word on this week before we move on and talk about this week's matchup.
How about I thought it was Marlon Humphrey that pushed the referee, and I was going to be like, oh boy. 3-step Derrick Henry was good, but me calling Marlon Humphrey to get thrown out of the game, that was real.
Pretty good.
It was close.
Yeah, almost, right?
Yep.
Could have been. If they had known his COVID test was positive, they might have kicked him out of the game. That's another story for another day. Dodge that bullet for now. Let's talk a little bit about this week's matchup.
How about them Cowboys?
How about them Cowboys? Yeah. Percentage chance, Jeremy, that the owner of the Cowboys, Jerry Jones, will be starting a quarterback this week.
I'm going to go with 0 on that.
percentage chance that he thought about it at least once this week.
I'm sure he did. I was making a joke with some coworkers today that they're going to have the coffin ready for Cooper or whoever the other guy is. I can't remember who the other guy they were talking about potentially starting, but I was like, they better have the coffin ready.
Yeah.
Whoever's going to be back there is just going to get.
I actually kind of like Cooper Rush. I forget the other quarterback. I liked him too a little bit. I like. Who is the other quarterback? What's that?
I have a funny story. Wednesday, I walk in. My mom had knee replacement surgery, so she's going through rehab. And the owner of the therapy place, I've met him probably 8 to 10 times. Really nice guy. Played football at Oregon in the early 1980s. And he's like, my nephew's starting at quarterback against the Steelers this Sunday. I hope you boys don't kill him. His name's Garrett Gilbert.
Oh, yeah, Garrett Gilbert. Yeah.
And he ended up finishing up at SMU. And it's actually his sister's son. And Gary's a great guy. But, yeah, I don't think that Cooper Rush or Garrett Gilbert are ready for what's going to come out.
No. I mean, I don't want to say that. I just meant that I like them both. In their draft years, I like them as what I like to call like quarterbacks you can take late or as undrafted free agents who might actually be able to be contributors as backup quarterbacks. Decent number 2, great number 3. Both of them can play. Garrett Gilbert, pretty good. I know that who loved him, which is probably a reason he is where he is Gil Brandt. Gil Brandt was raving about Gilbert. So I guess it's only right and proper that he ended up in Dallas. But yeah, this week's matchup, you normally FC asked, if you haven't noticed, I like to talk about the line play and work our way inside out and talking about the games. But I guess I'll start with you this week. The quarterback play for Dallas, is there any way that they can overcome the fact that they're going to be starting like their 4th string guy? It's like this is their Duck Hodges moment, right? So
it's their Duck Hodges moment with 4 backup offensive linemen and
right.
2 of the most overpaid players in the NFL. And Ezekiel Elliott, he's making almost twice as much money as Derrick Henry, and Amari Cooper, who is making more money than Julio Jones or Devontae Adams or just about any wide receiver.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Dallas has unbelievable management problems. And it's a shame what's happened to that organization. Don't get me wrong, I'm not too sad about it, but it is. They're the New York Knicks,
We are the New York Knicks. Yes,
so.
Well, I mean, Duck Hodges won, though. You know what I mean? He won a couple of games, and he even beat a pretty decent, Chargers team on the road. So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is we haven't seen that sort of complacency out of the Steelers this year, where they looked flat against a bad team. I think they looked a little flat, but it was more like because they barely had any preseason. But I just feel like, I mean, always ask that question, is the recipe there? Like, is there a path, talk about for the election, the path to victory whenever things look bleak? Is there still a path to victory for Dallas in this game? And if so, like if you're the coach of the Dallas Cowboys, how do you prepare this week to give your team a puncher's chance?
Can't turn the ball over. Can't take any penalties. Got to win the special teams. Got to stop the run. And you got to force Ben to make tight throws. Can Dallas Cowboys win this? Absolutely, they can win this week. Do I think they're going to win? No. But do they have a path to victory? Absolutely. Steelers turn over the football. The reason I don't expect the Steelers to be necessarily sluggish offensively, they're one screw-up from the season being over with a 38-year-old quarterback. Now, you can say that about a 28-year-old quarterback or a 22-year-old quarterback, but, Ben is the franchise. I couldn't believe it. I heard 3 national people say that if they had to vote for the MVP right now, they would vote for Ben Roethlisberger. And the reason they would is because, he's never got an MVP vote. He deserved it. He's a member of an undefeated team, and he's probably the most valuable player to any team in the NFL. And the other person argued Aaron Rodgers, which I won't disagree with, but I think so that's why I don't think you're going to see a blasé or sluggish effort from the Steelers offense. the defense, you have built-in excuses, but you also have those young, hungry guys that are coming into play. So generally, those guys they play like their hair is on fire. So you would have to be concerned about mental mistakes. But as I said, the Cowboys have 4 backup offensive linemen. They have 2 dangerous threats outside and a wide receiver, but can those guys deliver them the ball? Can they keep, Gilbert, or can they keep Cooper Rush upright, versus that Steelers rush? Sure.
If I ever told the story about the reggae being a reggae drummer on this show, there's my analogy for the situation, Jeremy, is I was in somewhere in the islands in the Caribbean, and I'm just hanging out next to the stage where the band happened to be playing, this patio party, and get to talking with the drummer, and he's like, "Oh, you're a musician? Yeah, what do you play?" I don't know, kind of everything, mostly keyboards and crap. But I toured as a drummer and everything else. He says, "Oh, you play drums? Here," and he hands me the sticks in the middle of the song, like it's going. And I didn't I'm trying to explain to him, like, played a lot of music, man. The amount of times I have played reggae on the drums is like, once farting around and for fun in a rehearsal or something. So anyway, he's already handed me the sticks. And it's like I'm halfway in the seat by the time I get a chance to even say no, so I can't say no. Anyway, he's like, you just go with what everybody else is doing. They'll make it easy. And I was like, okay. So in one of the great moments, it's like the band is so good around you and the groove is so strong with all of them that I was able to, I seemed like a genius. I sat in, I played, I looked like I was fan. He's like, well, you're fantastic. It's great. Great, man. So super. So to me, it's like these defensive players that get plugged into an amazing defense, so much easier than if they're some rookie getting thrown in on the Jets defense or somebody that's really terrible. Then you really can be exposed. If you're Robert Spillane, I think he's played well, don't get me wrong. But even if he were only okay, they have, he's surrounded by guys that are so good that they kind of carry you across the finish line. So even having a backup nose tackle and a backup inside linebacker for this game and a backup slot cornerback or whatever they're going to end up having, backup 5-tech if necessary. It just feels like the Steelers are maybe good enough to carry a guy. So against what Dallas has offered so far, you feel like it'll sort of be. Could this be a game where the Steelers defense starts to show the cracks of all the replacements and backup players? I mean, FC said emotionally no, but how about just, at some point Cinderella becomes a pumpkin, right?
Right. I mean, one key matchup I'd look at, I think, is, Zach Martin on the interior versus, whatever nose tackle we're trotting out there this week. Zach Martin is the one really good offensive lineman they have. But I don't have much faith in their other offensive linemen at all. I mean, they're not even good technicians. Not only do I not think they don't have great talent, they're not even good technicians. I don't want to throw a former Hoosier under the bus, but Brandon Knight at left tackle has not been a solution for success. He has been overmatched almost every time he takes a snap, and Bud Dupree will have a field day with him if they don't, chip Bud Dupree on the outside, just the way TJ Watt is going to beat their right tackle. The rookie from Texas Tech, Terrence Steele, I believe is his name.
Steele, yeah.
Yeah, Steele. I mean, just those guys are just overmatched as soon as they step on the field every week. I think Steele could be a solid player down the road, but it's his rookie season, and it's just this perfect storm of chaos in Dallas this year where it's like nothing. That I will admit, I thought Dallas put up a much bigger fight last week than I thought they would. They actually seemed like they wanted to play football, which was not the case the week before. Yep. You could tell the week before they were already fighting for whatever plane seats that they were going to be getting on the way home.
That was the week before Cleveland? Is that what it was?
Yeah, I think it's the week they got destroyed by Washington.
Okay, because I know the Cleveland game, I actually listened to a little bit of the game on the Dallas radio network in the car, and the announcers were basically saying, without saying it in these exact words, that Dallas's defense was basically not trying anymore. Like that they had gotten to a point in the game where they just quit, which is unbelievable.
Right. But like I said, that looked very different from the team I saw play this past week. I think it was when they were playing the Giants, or whoever it was. I can't even remember who they were playing.
The
Eagles.
Yep. Thank you. I knew it was an NFC East team, just couldn't remember. They actually looked like they were trying. DeMarcus Lawrence was giving it all in his pass rush. Vander Esch coming back finally gave them a needed boost at linebacker. I thought the cornerback Diggs, I thought he actually had really good coverage almost the entire game. There were a few throws he got beat on, but these guys are professionals. They're paid to show up and play an NFL game every week. If Pittsburgh were to truly, lay an egg, we could lose, but I just don't see it. I think this team is way too good and way too focused right now that they're going to come out here and lay an egg. I just don't think they have the horses to keep up, especially on offense. That offensive line, I've mentioned it already, but they are just truly underwhelmed every time they take the field.
Yeah, that just seems like that side of the football particularly is a bad problem for them. Getting Vander Esch back, at least they look a little bit more normal on defense. But FC, flip over to that side with Dallas's defense and Pittsburgh's offense. So last week, obviously in the second half, Ben took the control of the flow and was basically telling guys what to run out on the field, which is without doing it in the traditional no huddle style with the hand motions and everything. He was literally just telling them, just like run an 8-yard out, run a post pattern. Just like that's the football I play, every Sunday. And even they just stopped calling plays altogether, and you guys just go out. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if at least one play Ben just said, "Yeah, just run her out, do whatever you want." But that seemed to work against the Ravens because the Ravens are like super well prepared. They're looking at the analytics sheets and breaking down your tendencies for every down and what you'll be doing in the third quarter when you have when you're down by a touchdown and blah blah blah. And Ben just threw all that out of the window. So that's a good strategy against a team that's heavily analytics. FC, by the way, I'm sorry I'm taking away from your time, but did you read the interview with Cliff Harris this week on Steelers Takeaways?
I did not.
So Cliff Harris was saying that he thought the biggest reason that the Steelers were successful against the Cowboys specifically in the Super Bowls was because Terry Bradshaw didn't know anything about the analytics or what he was supposed to do or how he was supposed to read their defense or react to the stuff that they showed him. He'd go to the wrong place where they wanted him to throw the football, but his arm would beat the play or he would go against a tendency or whatever. And so he felt like they were over-prepared, and that's one of the reasons that the Steelers bit them. This thing with Ben, how long can you go to that well and have it work once you get on tape and show what you've been doing with it? Like, is it the kind of thing that has a short shelf life and they shouldn't use it more, or should that be what the offense for the Steelers looks like all the time?
Wow. For a guy that has a big problem with the round combinations in the first half, I like attacking multiple levels of the field. I come from the Sid Luckman school passing more than the West Coast school passing.
Sure.
Cliff Harris's comment may be true, but I've watched a lot of football, old films included. I don't think I've seen three better throwers of the football in my life than Terry Bradshaw. I'm going to say that right now.
Yep.
Bad weather, whipping wind, snow, Three River Stadium, throwing ball 70 yards. Patrick Mahomes, Brett Favre, and Terry Bradshaw are the three best, and that includes John Elway because he had a little hitch from the baseball playing, are the best throwers. That doesn't mean that they were the most accurate. That don't mean they were winners like Tom Brady. But if you gave me horrible weather conditions, 45, 55-mile-per-hour winds, snow, wet football, those are the three guys I want because I know that their arm and arm strength, they can overcome anything. Jeff George would be on that list, but Jeff George No offense, Indiana was a fucking moron.
Indiana salutes you, sir.
Yes. But anyway, to get back to your question, I like to attack short, middle, and deep on every pass play. You want to come at me hot? That's fine. I'm going to run a 9-stop, or I'm going to run a straight 9 route, go route to Chase Claypool. It's going to be automatic. Your safety or your corner cannot cover. I believe that. He's too big, too fast, too strong, and he attacks the football with ferocity. Juju Smith-Schuster, if he leaves after this year, should never have to buy a meal or a drink in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania ever again, because from day one, he's been everything that the Steelers should ever dream of a player being. He plays hard. He's not the player screaming, "Get me the fucking ball." He blocks his heart out. He is a great teammate. You can see that he has legitimate joy when other players succeed, where Anthony Brown,
certain other guys we don't mention, yeah. And
that is what makes the Steelers 7-0. They have a bunch of guys like that. The passing game is, if you got 4 short routes, you got Juju Smith-Schuster and Jalen Samuels. I love the ball control passing game, but there's times that you have to stretch a defense. And that is why I think the Steelers do more out of no huddle and when Ben gets to run the offense than whenever he's getting it from Fitch and from Canada.
Yeah.
I think they are far more close to the best where Ben is looking to attack. And, you can't – a leopard can't change his spots. A zebra can't change his stripes. Ben wants to attack. And you're going to take the good with that.
I think the thing about that, FC, is it feels like when they're in more of an attacking mode with the pass game, then suddenly that dump off to the running back, that James Conner made so much hay with in 2018 becomes part of the offense that's unstoppable. That really, it's like you think you've got everything covered down the field, and then you get a dump off to this guy underneath. And it's the equivalent of these young running quarterbacks who face, they get this man coverage and everybody's covered and they take off with the football and make you pay. That's Ben's version of it, is you dump it off to this running back and you get a free play that buys you another down, buys you.
You get Le'Veon Bell $50 guaranteed on 66 catches.
But if you don't attack downfield, if most of your game is pounding the rock, you don't or these super quick short passes all the time, then you don't buy that space for the running back to get out, which is what happened in 2019 2018, Connor and Samuels both had excellent results catching the football out of the backfield on these dump offs or whatever, because they had space created by the deep threat of Ben and obviously Antonio Brown. Then in 2019, suddenly you had no Brown and quarterbacks who didn't threaten defenses at all, and suddenly there's no space underneath. They would throw the football to these running backs while they were getting tackled. Like they wouldn't even have a chance to make a play because there's no space underneath. So, Jeremy, it feels like they, the strategy of coming out and attacking early feels like it opens it up so much more for even a running game, to make if you want your running game to be more efficient, attack early so that when you hand it off, you've already got guys second guessing what they're doing on defense. So my question for you is, why don't they adopt that strategy more? Why are they in this mindset that you have to establish the run to do everything else?
Well, I'd hate to say it, but that sounds like anti-Pittsburgh Steeler football.
You mispronounced Pittsburgh, my friend.
Okay, but you know what I mean. It's just like they have it in their mind that a running game is always going to be, the kind of the bread, butter, and backbone of this team. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But, Ben's this prolific quarterback. They've had the luxury of having him here for the last 14, 15 years. They've seen him make incredible play after incredible play, and a lot of them is doing just what he did this past Sunday. Let's try this with this. You're going to run this, you're going to run this. I'm going to call my own plays. He's had a lot of success with that, where, like you said, it's in that attacking mode of offense. Let's get after these guys. But then the Steelers, when they have done that, then they've gotten away from it. almost went back to cower turtling with the ball, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. As long as we keep moving the clock, our chances of winning keep improving. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I've always been a proponent of you always have to stay aggressive because the ball can go any way you don't want it to, and that can completely change the momentum of the game. It's kind of the same way on defense. Us attacking Baker Mayfield constantly. We didn't let up. We didn't stop. Why wouldn't – it's almost the complete opposite on one side of the ball. On defense, we have this constant attack vibe. On offense, we have let's see if this will work. We'll see if this works. Hopefully this will work mentality.
Yeah. They're willing to risk giving up a big play on defense, but they're not willing to risk making a big mistake on offense. It's very strange.
Right. Right. Because they have the pieces on offense to make big plays. And it just doesn't seem like we go to the well enough when we can.
Yeah. Right. FC, we've been watching Ben for 15 years. I'm not suggesting that this is what they should do, but I mean, what would happen if they basically lined up Ben and threw the football 50, 60 times a game? It's like I'm not sure that they would be any worse at converting third downs, at possessing the ball, at scoring points. Tell me where I'm wrong.
I don't think you're wrong. Where I think that you may be wrong on the initial point is I don't think that Ben, if you got to call the offense would run the ball or pass the ball 50 or 60 times. I actually think he would mix in the run game because I think he understands that 7 in the box, that's a win. But if you're gonna, if you're gonna put that 8 man in the box, I'm gonna burn your ass. I'm not certain of this, but the 2005 offensive staff, I believe, was Malarkey and Weisenhunt were on the same staff. And I believe that Weisenhunt was the offensive coordinator and Mike Malarkey was the quarterback coach. Would that be correct? Well,
I thought Weisenhunt was the OC already in 2005. So Malarkey, was he the tight ends coach? Is that what you think?
Okay, or maybe quarterback coach. Correct. But both were on the staff. And you remember, say, the AFC divisional playoff game against Denver, where everybody thought we were going to get killed. Jake Plummer was quarterback. We had to go into Denver on the road. We were the 6th seed. I believe it was the divisional round. And Ben came out and was 16 of 18 for 221 and 3 touchdowns in the first half.
Right.
We had coached the victory. That is what I think Ben Roethlisberger would like to do on offense.
Agreed.
30, 35 passes, a ton early, until you respect me. And then whenever you pull that 8th man out of the box, here comes Connor, here comes the run game.
Right.
And we've been saying it for as long as we've been in this podcast. You pass to win, you pass to win the game, and you run to kill the clock.
Yeah.
And that's
pass to score, run to win. Yeah.
Right. And
by the way, Malarkey was not with the Steelers then. He was the head coach of Buffalo.
Okay. I stand corrected then.
He left the Steelers in 2003.
Okay, I thought that we had 2 similar type of offensive minds. I can't remember who it was right off the top of my head. For some reason, Malarkey didn't sound right, but I wasn't certain of it. Regardless, at that time, because I think that Ben, he had just come off the rookie year where he went 14-0 in the regular season, got knocked off in the playoffs, and the second half of that season, starting with, I believe, the Minnesota Vikings team, we got whacked by Philadelphia. Then we played the Minnesota Vikings game, Chicago in the snow, and the Steelers caught fire. I think the Steelers just happened to catch fire early in the year offensively in some ways. And the first thing that Ben realized is this Claypool kid, within 15 or 20 plays on offense, I got to put the fear of God into safety. And whenever you got a guy that's pretty much bigger than our outside linebacker, Highsmith, that we drafted, and faster than, probably any player in the AFC North not named Lamar Jackson, I can put the God into teams and in players. And that's the first thing that I noticed about in that Ravens game in the second half is Chuck Clark looked at Marlon Humphrey when Chase Claypool almost made a play and was like, we don't got nothing to stop that. There ain't nothing we can do. I cannot come off this hatch and give you the help against him.
Yep.
And I think that there's a lot of defensive coordinators that are going to be realizing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I would argue that in terms of as a mismatch on the guys that are usually tasked to cover him, that Ebron is nearly as big a mismatch inside because of that burst that he gives you against a bigger player or the size that he gives you against the safety. And it just feels like they, they've used Ebron, especially they've gone to Ebron at times when they needed to play down the field, but it doesn't feel like they've really used Ebron or Claypool the way that teams in the NFL lean on the guys that they use a lot. Like you look at the Green Bay Packers, that Devontae Adams gets fed the football. Robert Tonyan even gets fed the football at times. They use those mismatches and they feed him over and over again. And the only guy that really gets fed the football in this offense, well, I say James Conner, but Deontay Johnson gets targets. But it just feels like they have the personnel to do it. They just have to have the personality to do it.
They have so much personnel. They have so much at the positions. Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith, Chase Claypool, Eric Ebron, James Conner. There's a lot of mouths to feed. Yep.
And that's one of the problems when you have so many guys is trying to figure out. So you only have one football. What do you do with it? Jeremy, you've been left out for a while. You want to have
no egos, no divas. So there's no backlash if Juju Smith-Schuster only gets 2 targets.
By the way, I want to say also quickly about Juju that he fought for like 6 inches. He gave, he would give his life to get an extra 6 inches on every catch that he had. That is something that I think his teammates really appreciate. I know personally as a fan, when people try to badmouth him for whatever reason they have agenda, that a player that fights like that with the ball, man, that means a lot, especially at a position like wide receiver where they don't all fight for a couple extra yards. Maybe they fight like that if they're
a lot like the last player we drafted from USC whenever it comes to football character. That's the only thing I'll say. Troy Polamalu.
Oh, that guy. Yeah, right. Yeah, I remember him.
Football character-wise. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Jeremy, you've been left out of this conversation for a while. I'm sorry. I'm chatty as hell tonight.
No,
So in terms of this spreading the football around in the Steelers-style offense, anything you'd like to add to that conversation?
Well, I mean, I think that's how the great teams do it. I think that's what made San Francisco so tough last year is that they just spread the ball around in their offense a bunch. Yeah, they ran the ball a bunch, but they gave the ball to Emmanuel Sanders. They gave the ball to Deebo Samuel. They, let George Kittle get in the game. They let Ross Dwelly go out and catch the ball last year, and he's your backup tight end. They effectively used all of their big shiny weapons. I think that's simply what we need to do in Pittsburgh here going forward. We've got so much talent. Let's use it all, because as soon as, a defense tries to take one away, Ebron's going to burn your linebacker the rest of the game. If you devoted safety help to help cover Claypool on the outside going deep, that just means Ebron's going to feast on your linebacker inside all day.
Sure.
There's so many different things the Steelers can do with the type of talent they have. Deontay Johnson's an explosive guy in his own right. He had a big game versus the Titans, getting loose and making people miss. He had 2 touchdowns that game, and, he had a great game, largely invisible this past game versus the Ravens for the most part. But I expected a little bit of that with just how tough the Ravens are at the line of scrimmage. That can disrupt a lot of routes and throw off timing as far as the passing game goes. But it's like you have all these guys. Vance McDonald is your second tight end. I mean, he was a guy that has made some big plays over the last 2 years for Pittsburgh. I mean, he was a Sports Center top 10 number 1 with that little shove of the Tampa Bay player,
Yep.
That famous stiff arm. That was a huge deal. To have him as your second tight end, I mean, that's a luxury, as far as a passing game weapon goes.
Yeah, here's the thing. I mean, you said, they're hard. They disrupt things. The Ravens cornerbacks disrupt things at the line of scrimmage. You say disrupt. I say basically holding and grabbing wide receivers. I mean, they're good at like testing the limits of how much contact you can have with wide receivers on the line. But as relates to Vance McDonald, FC. I mean, one observation I made about this game is it's easy to be down on guys like Jalen Samuels or Anthony McFarland who come in the game and then they they get their shot and they fall down or they drop a pass or whatever, and then people are like, get that guy out of the game. I don't want to see him anymore. He can be off the roster or whatever. But my counter to that is, guys need to have some touches. It's a little bit unfair to throw a guy in who he's basically not even seen the field for 3 quarters, and then you toss him in there and you call this play for them, and if they don't do it perfectly, then they're out of the game. To me, it's like you build that relationship, you build their confidence a little bit, you build the relationship a little bit so that that when you have to go to them on something that's not a designed play for them, that they're going to be there for you. I mean, am I wrong to think that, if anything, that the Vance McDonalds and Anthony McFarlands and Jalen Samuels should be getting more touches at the expense of the guys that they maybe lean on a little bit too much?
I think that McFarland brings an element to the offense that we don't have in our backfield, which is one cut, and he can really make some plays. Check the Ohio State film from when he was in college. Vance McDonald, on the other hand, a lot of times when we celebrate that Terminator run, Connor run, what often gets overlooked is Vance McDonald's down block on a 275-pound defensive end,
sure,
which opens that hole, or Jalen Samuels block coming back inside, which allows Juju Smith, instead of get 8 yards on 3rd and 11, to get 12 yards on 3rd and 11, where he out-muscles one guy where he would not muscle two. In getting players' tastes, I think that is a really good way of putting it. And I think that most people that watch the NFL now, Kansas City's passing offense and the talent, a lot of people think it's a benchmark. And I would not only argue, but I'd be dug in and willing to fight that I would take Mahomes over Ben, and I'd probably take Tyree Hill and Kelsey over Juju and Zach Ebron. But you better believe I'm going to take Claypool, and I'm going to take Johnson, and the rest of our guys over DeMarcus Robinson and Pringle and Mecole Hardman. The point that I'm making is Kansas City, I think I'm not a big fan of Fat Andy, but he does do a good job of getting the stars the ball, but he knows when he gets the supplemental, pieces of the ball. Patrick Mahomes didn't deserve the Super Bowl MVP last year. Williams, the running back, did. I mean, 211 yards, Patrick Mahomes passing yards came on screen passes, and of those 211 yards, I believe that Williams had 131 yards after contact. So, I understand that the fan base wants Claypool to play 60 or 70 snaps. I would love it too. But, you have to design your offense for the team. Then you definitely have to give Vance McDonald his touches. Vance McDonald deserves those touches for what he does in the run game. And the same thing can be said for Jalen Samuel. Now, I would like to see a little less of Jalen Samuel in the offense. It's nothing against Jalen Samuel. I would like to see him maybe put on 10 pounds and be our fullback. But,
here's the thing, though, that thing, the pass that he dropped, the route that he runs, he's got that little burst coming out of his breaks that not every running back has. That's the thing that you want him to have. So if he gains the weight, maybe he doesn't have that. And I'm not suggesting you build a package for him or anything else. I just mean, guys that add different elements that have a couple of things that they're good at. I think that you got to show the threat of them so that when they're on the they're on the field, that nobody can tell exactly where you're going. And just having so many of the carries to James Conner for running backs and so many of the targets in the passing game going to Deontay Johnson, that's kind of a big deal.
Go back to 2005 real quick. Do you remember when we would basically we had You and I have commented on the board. We have 4 quarterbacks on the field at times. With Antoine Randall, quarterback in Indiana, Cedric Wilson, who came to quarterback at the University of Tennessee, Heinz Ward, and Ben Roethlisberger. So the shenanigans are really at hand. People said, the Steelers got a trick. No, the Steelers are taking advantage of the talent of the players they had on the field. And a lot of people didn't get that. Oh, it's a trick gimmick offense. No, you're taking advantage of the skills of the positions on the field.
Yeah. Well, that's a good note to leave it on. We are going to go back and go back to the Steelers game and give our predictions for this week's game. But first, it's time for our illustrious pick segment, brought to us this week by
Mike Perry, Steve Bandino, and Tony fucking Romo and Jim Nance. Who my father, God bless him, pushing 80, says, if I start going senile, I'm grabbing my pistol and I'm killing this two son of a bitch. My dad does not get emotional or really into football games that much anymore. But watching that game, and I don't watch a ton of them with him, he said, is it me or do these two cocksuckers hate the Steelers? And I was like, it's not you, Dad.
Here's the saddest part. The saddest part is that I'd be hard-pressed to come up with an analyst who's better to listen to than Tony Romo. That's which one?
Mark Strauss, 13 for Fox. He is the announcer in the NFL. Mark Strauss, former offensive guard for Denver and Washington.
Yeah, I just think. Yeah, no, he's good. I get that.
You can't have.
All right, but I'm just saying, it's like I would. Some of them are even worse. I guess I would say many, if not most, are worse, which is a sad state.
It's worse, but it's just it's Jim Nance. If I had to be honest,
I think that's the real problem. Great golf announcer, though. Let's talk a little bit about your Seattle Seahawks, a 3-point favorite at Buffalo. I'm throwing it to you first, Jeremy. What do you make of this? Buffalo seems like a little bit of a tough place to play for teams that don't play there all the time. What do you think about the Seattle-Buffalo?
Well, you've got Russ Wilson. He's one of the hottest quarterbacks in the NFL right now. I think it boils down to consistency, and I think that's where Josh Allen has been off a few times this year through no fault of his own. It's just they don't get a fast start, so they've got to come back. Russell Wilson and Seattle are playing phenomenal football outside of, their one loss to Arizona. Arizona was able to kind of exploit some holes in that defense and move the ball on the ground, which a few other teams before have been able to do that, like Minnesota, was very effective on the ground. In Seattle, kept that a very close game. I would say I'm going with Seattle, though. I understand Buffalo is a tough place to play, especially once it starts to get cold. That's not, Seattle's completely different as far as temperature and kind of climate goes. But I think Seattle's kind of playing some special football right now. I'm going to say Seattle wins that game.
FC, how about you?
I'll take the Seahawks. I'll lay the points. Russell Wilson showed me he was a bad weather quarterback when he played his grad transfer year at Wisconsin.
Yeah, but here's the problem. It's not going to be bad weather. It's going to be summertime up here in the Northeast. Oh. I think it's supposed to be 70 degrees and sunny or something on Sunday. So
DK Metcalf and Kevin Lockett. Or Tyler Lockett. Oh, I'm showing my age. His father was Kevin Lockett.
You're not even that old.
Yeah.
It's all those blows to the head. I'll take Seattle as well. We talked about Tennessee being a team that, aside from last week, is a team that plays better at a higher level than you think. Like they're better than you think they are on a week-to-week basis. And Buffalo is a team that should be better, and they're capable of on a given week beating anybody. But they just seem a little bit out of sorts right now, which it happens to teams in the middle of the season sometimes. And they either get it together and make a stretch run, or they fade and that was it, right? But I think we're all aligned about Seattle. Let's talk about Baltimore at Indianapolis. Baltimore is a 1.5-point favorite at the Colts. I'm going to go to you first, Dom. How do you see this game? Baltimore, by the way, without Marlon Humphrey, if I'm not mistaken.
And seven linebackers.
And 7, there you go. Somehow they're not postponing this game, though. which I'm not complaining about, but it's crazy.
Right. Jeremy may not be too happy with this pick. I'm going to take the Indianapolis Colts. I'm going to take the 1.5. I watched the Colts, and everybody talks about their pass defense, and it's pretty nasty, but they got some big boys. Also, on the defensive line, Allie Armstead was a huge get for them. So I'll take the Colts. I'll take the points. I think the Colts win outright.
Jeremy, how about you?
Yeah, to begin the year, I was dogging the Colts, to be honest. Everyone was like, "Oh, they've got this great defense." I was like, "Yeah, you look real great when you play Detroit, Minnesota, the Jets. They had a very easy start to their schedule. They let Jacksonville sneak in and beat them. Very first game of the year. But honestly, had been telling people that Phillip Rivers really had not played good football, but it actually I've watched them the past 2 weeks, and it looks like Phillip Rivers is finally starting to play kind of up to that former Pro Bowl level. In the beginning of the year, I thought he looked pretty shaky. He's looked better these past few weeks. He's made much bigger plays these past 2 weeks. I'm going to go with the Colts, too. I think the Ravens, I think they're going to struggle offensively against the Colts defense. And like Dom said, the defensive line for the Colts, it might not have a ton of big names outside of DeForest Buckner, but, man, do they get after the passer. They shut down the run game. I think the Colts find a way to win this one. I think it'll be a dogfight. I can understand why it's a 1.5 line for Baltimore. Even though they're going to be looking to be bouncing back off a tough loss to Pittsburgh.
Well, I like to make myself look good on this show by picking games that I figure I have a different opinion than everybody else. And I've done really well with that the last 3 weeks, just for the record. But I said at about a minute after the final gun in Baltimore this weekend that Baltimore was going to lose this game. And part of it was that Lamar Jackson took like 60 hits in that game. And I just feel like you play this, physical style game against a division opponent that you're all sort of like wrapped up in. That's got to take a little bit of a toll. And then, the loss that Tennessee had this last weekend reminded me of a stat I saw. I want to say, I can't remember if it was 2005 or 2008. It was around that era, and they were discussing the record of teams the week after they played the Steelers. It was terrible for a while. Their teams were losing like 3 out of 4 games the following week after playing the Steelers. Just a physical game against their defense, particularly, or maybe because their offense runs the ball a lot or something, or they're just more a physical football team. But I just feel like that's going to, it's a good chance that will wear down the Ravens. I'll even make a bonus pick. If Indianapolis loses this game, it'll be because Phillip Rivers makes a turnover in the final drive of the game with a chance to win. Because that's his MO when he's playing well is, you get on the stretch where you're like, okay, yeah, I guess he's actually playing better now. And then he'll absolutely disintegrate in some big game. One more, gentlemen, that'd be your Tampa Bay Buccaneers hosting the New Orleans Saints. The Bucs are a 4-point favorite in this game. That's the Sunday night game this week. Breeze and Brady, Breeze and Brady, Brady and Breeze, Brady and Breeze, Breeze and Brady. I know you're gonna just get it out of the way now, so you don't have to have the sound up on Sunday night. Jeremy, I'll start with you.
Well, Michael Thomas should be back for this game, so I think that makes the Saints a little more dangerous. I'm going to go with Tampa Bay, though. I think we're going to mention their names. I think Brady is going to take the first week loss a little personal. This is where he's going to be able to come back and say, no, I'm going to beat the Saints this time around. Honestly, Tampa Bay's played really good football. Their defense is still really getting after it, considered, statistically, I believe they are the best defense in football. I don't believe that. I believe we have that in Pittsburgh, obviously. But Antonio Brown is back this week, too.
Oh, no. Is it this week or next week?
I thought it was this week.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Oh, okay. I didn't think he was playing until next week.
No. So he's back this week. Something tells me they're going to have something up their sleeves with him. Here's a guy who's been well rested for over a year and a half. Hasn't played any meaningful full NFL snaps, and so I think a one-game stint in New England, and Tom recruited Antonio Brown to Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay and Tom Brady, they're going to put on a show this week.
FC, how about you?
Drew Brees is actually questionable for this game. He hasn't practiced yet this week. I expect he does. One thing I'll give Tom Brady credit for, he's smart. In the one game that Antonio Brown played with him, on the first 21 plays, Antonio Brown was targeted 9 times. I expect Tampa Bay wins this game. I don't think they're going to win it as easily as a lot of people do. I think a lot of people are down on the Saints defense. So you're going to find out a lot about Tampa's run defense without Vita Vea this week. They actually showed some holes over the past few weeks. But when push comes to shove, I'll put my money on Brady and Gronk, Mike Evans, Antonio Brown. I don't think Antonio Brown blows up the Tampa Bay Buccaneers yet.
Yeah, I actually made an observation as well. I think Gronk starting to look a little bit more like the player who retired than he did the first few weeks of the season, where he looked a little bit not really up to football's strength or speed. But last week he looked a little bit like Gronk, honestly, which is unfortunate for the rest of the league. I have a hard time with this one. I think I'm inclined to say Tampa Bay, but I'm not sure they'll cover the 4. Maybe that's how I'll hedge it. I do agree that New Orleans can put up some points against them, but I sort of like Brady to win the game at the end. 4 points, therefore, is, that's significant if they win by a field goal. So I'll call it the Tampa Bay with the backdoor cover for New Orleans. But that brings us to our 5-star matchup. The 5-star matchup this week is your Pittsburgh Steelers at your Dallas Cowboys. That sounds great on paper. I'll bet before the season they were like, ooh, this is going to be a matchup this week. Steelers and Cowboys renewing their rivalry of the 70s and the 90s, et cetera, et cetera. FC, I'll go to you first. How do you see this happening?
Hate to do it. Never, ever, 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 ever we do whenever I write a pregame. I'm going to take the Pittsburgh Steelers to win this game 27-0. I just think that the Steelers are at a different level mentally and physically, and I think they are the far better team. Best team isn't always the most talented, and I don't think the Steelers are the most talented team in the NFL, but I do think that they are the best team. I said that I would proclaim what the Steelers were after the Titans, Browns, Ravens, and what I think they are is, without a doubt, the best team in the NFL. So I'll take them 27-0.
Old. Jeremy.
I might even go bolder. I'm going to go 41-3.
There's something worse about predicting 41-3 than 27-0. 27-0 is like, we ran the ball a lot and we got them down and they kept trying for touchdowns later. 41-3 is like you're up 30-0 at the half, and the other team does a 2-minute drill and they kick a field goal to feel better about themselves. Sorry, go ahead.
Well. So the one thing I will say is the Steelers have scored over 30 points in almost every game they've won, except this past week against Baltimore, and they're facing one of the worst defenses in the NFL. So not only do I think the offense is going to get after it, there's no way the defense doesn't get after it this week and give Pittsburgh Steelers some short fields.
Yeah, here's what I think. I think Dallas is playing a little better now than they were earlier in the season. If this game had been played like 4 or 5 weeks ago, I'd be all over this blowout. I still think it'll be a blowout of sorts. But I will make it a slightly more respectable 31-13 for your Pittsburgh Steelers to win. I just feel like the Steelers defense is good for one of those drives a game where the other team runs it down their throat or makes a big play or something. So it's a little bit too hard to shut them out, especially because DiNucci's not playing again. If Ben DiNucci were starting this game, I'd be all over that shutout score. But still, I'll call it 31-13. Yeah, so not the closest game. To me, the downside with this game is you just played this stretch of, high-octane, intense matchups, and now you're, going on the road and you're playing, on turf and it's like all kinds of stuff about this game is just like different than they have been for the last few weeks. It doesn't necessarily, automatically generate the kind of passion we'd like to see from them. But hopefully I'm wrong about that, and that they'll be it'll be more like 48-0. It'll be worse than either of you said. But I love that the humiliation field goal, the one where you're like, we're showing that we're giving up on winning the game just so that we can not get shut out. That's terrible. Last word, I'll give one to you, Jeremy.
But I think I said something a little bit along the lines of this earlier. Have the coffin ready for whatever Dallas trots out there at quarterback. I mean, there's just no way they're keeping that white jersey clean in Dallas this week.
FC, how about you?
Right on CBS Sports. Found it hard to believe, but for the first time in the NFL history, one team had 4 different players be NFL Defensive Player of the Week. Stephen Stewart was named the NFL Defensive Player this week to go along with Bud Dupree, T.J. Watt, and Vince Williams week 1 to be the 4th player to be named the NFL Defensive Player of the Week. I found that to be amazing.
Yeah, none of them were named Minka Fitzpatrick either, or Cam Hayward. They got room to go. I'll make my last word this. I mentioned earlier that the Steelers, need to attack so that they can build some space for their running backs, both in the run game and also in receiving out of the backfield game. I feel like they had their extended preseason in the first 4 games of the year, and worked on a lot of stuff. This game, I feel like, to keep their attention, I think that's the kind of thing you focus on is let's get some of this deep intermediate game working so that we can open up the rest of our offense. And I have a feeling that we're going to see not just this, arbitrary sideline deep shots, but some real working of deep balls and deep intermediate balls in this game. It's a good week to try that and not feel like you have to worry that any mistake you make will be magnified. So be aggressive, push the ball downfield, and let's talk next week after a big Steelers victory. Thank you to Smith & Smokin', Jeremy Coleman there with us in Indianapolis, to Dom FC down there in South Carolina, to Steel Perch, who wasn't with us tonight but in spirit, and for everyone at SteelerFury.com board and all of you Steeler fans out there listening on the show, be sure to join us at SteelerFury.com for articles and discussion about the Pittsburgh Steelers that you love so much, and also on Facebook at the Steeler Fury podcast page on Facebook. In the meantime, I'm your host, Bradshaw DeBen, a.k.a. Accidental Zen on Twitter, also known as Will Mastersack here in the flesh. And to all of you, I say, go get 'em, Steelers.
Go Steelers.